Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Liturgical Shenanigans, a Wayfolk Arts podcast. In this space, we invite you to explore themes of liturgy, faith, the arts, and everything in between with hosts Hannah, Maddie, Phil, and myself, Jackson. This is the fourth in our series of opening episodes of this podcast, and this week we're getting to know Phil a little bit more. The liturgy that Phil picked this week is a classic one that you will likely have heard before, and we're looking forward to having the conversation about it with all of you. Now, here's the thing. We often get pretty excited about these conversations, and though we try to keep our podcast to a short 20 to 40 minute episode, there's so much more to talk about, and we get to continue talking about it in our after show, which we make available to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/Wayfolk Arts. So if you are excited by this conversation and want to hear more, you can head on over to there to find us at patreon.com/Wayfolk Arts. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this week's conversation. So I'm really excited about the episode this week. I actually am. It's because France, we're doing a traditional piece, something from kind of liturgical history, and it's a figure that I'm a fan of. And it's not even my week because it's actually the week to talk about Phil. Phil, you want to say anything as we're getting into this?
I was up for this right until you said we're talking about me, and I felt my body squeeze shut.
Squeeze shut? No.
It's okay. We're gonna do this.
Yeah. What's the liturgy you have selected for us this week?
So yeah, I'm going to share with you a liturgy that is typically titled as the Prayer of Saint Francis, or the Prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi, or just the Peace Prayer. It's an older prayer, and maybe after we share it, we can get into a little bit about its history and why I picked it. I don't know that there's a whole lot to share before we just hear this prayer. Many of you have probably heard it before in church or in other settings, publications. It's a very famous prayer. It is in the public domain, so if you are playing with it, you have license to do so. Anything we think we need to talk about before maybe we hear it together?
I don't think so. In general, we like to encourage you to kind of find yourself as you prepare to hear this liturgy. Take a moment, take a deep breath, breathe in, and breathe out. Allow your soul to catch up with you. And now let's hear this prayer, a prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi.
Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.
I love the kind of, I don't know, there's like it's not quite sing-song, but sort of like a heart rhythm familiarity in that. I don't know if any of you are in churches that have used this liturgy before, or if you've come across it in one of its many iterations that make its way. It's even in a musical, if you've seen the musical Come From Away.
Yeah.
It's a song from Come From Away. It's a hymn.
Yeah.
It's a hymn that's sung.
There's a Sarah McLachlan version.
Oh my goodness.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty okay.
So I'm curious, you kind of teased us just a little bit at the beginning part to talk about why why this piece and also some of the history behind it.
So some of that I think I can overlap and try not to make too deep of meaning about it. But reasons I wanted to bring this and things I resonate with about it is one of them is identity. That this feels like I relate to this prayer in the sense that it is not what it claims to be or what others claim it to be, because the words in it don't say, hey, St. Francis wrote me. The history of it, as I've heard and as I've seen, as I've looked into it a little bit, St. Francis was, a 12th century person in Italy. This prayer can't be dated back earlier than like the early 1900s in French. So it's not necessarily likely to be traced back to St. Francis. Any Franciscan orders don't attribute it to St. Francis, although some do utilize it and say that it's very in the spirit of Francis. It showed up in a magazine and was circulated on cards, like prayer cards with art on the other side, especially in the World Wars. And the story goes, one of those had a picture of St. Francis on the back, and that's maybe where the connection comes from. But yeah, it is not the prayer of St. Francis, and yet that's what it gets called and what it's expected to be, and the associations we make with it. And I feel that because I think I've spent a lot of my life feeling called to be something that isn't necessarily what I have ever claimed to be, but maybe is what I've perceived others' assumptions or expectations of me to be. And I have done my best to be in that role. And that I resonate with that history. It makes me chuckle. It's not why I picked it, but it is one of the reasons I resonate with it. I have other things to say, but I'm curious, how does that strike all of y'all?
What do you mean?
I'm excited. I'm getting called out. Let's go.
What do you mean it's not something you necessarily feel like you have been called to be?
Oh, sure.
And I ask specifically because I know you as Phil the Peacemaker, who seems to actually, I would even phrase it as, to believe the lie that Phil has to show up as the one who does all these things for everybody else in all spaces, always. So what do you mean you don't feel called?
Oh, interesting. I don't feel like that's my actual... I've never claimed to be that thing.
I see.
But I feel it's an So if you look at... I think about how I showed up at the last church I was at a lot, and I think I've gotten to a point where I don't feel any guilt about any way I showed up or didn't show up. But I definitely chose to stay in a place where others could continue to assume that I would align with them on certain positions, or that whatever their political thing is, I might be condoning of it, even, like, let alone agreeing with it, right? And I, let other people put their picture of what they needed me to be on me, and allowed that to be, rather than actually say, no, I'm not actually St. Francis. I'm a French magazine article, and here I am,
Scandalous.
Does that make sense? And for me, that's not the reason I picked this. And in fact, the stuff I love about this prayer doesn't go away if St. Francis didn't write it. In fact, it gave me something else to add to the conversation here tonight and made me love it a little bit more. So there's that part of it.
Yeah. I'm excited to get into those themes that like make that are drawn out of this. I do want to just like ask the quick question: what is it that you see in it, and that people have commented on it that it's very Francis of Assisi like? Like, what are the things in it that are like, well, yeah, I mean, it's very in the vein of Francis, but he didn't write it.
Yeah. It actually does tie. That's kind of interesting too. There's this close companion of St. Francis who is also from Assisi, who had like sayings that were remembered, and this ties to some of those. So that's kind of neat. But in general, the peacemaking, the very others focus, the care focus, as opposed to the prayer for self angles of it, the giving nature of this prayer, are reasons that it has resonated with me for a long time. And if I can, well, here, I'm going to saga as I do.
Sure.
I'm going to try to get to my point.
Do it.
We're not close to it yet. First, I'm going to tell you what the point is not. So I think when I was first drawn to this, it was because I was interpreting it, and there's a theme here, I think, of that. I was interpreting it in a way that aligned with how I had understood what it means for me to live into my call. Right? So for me, and I don't know if everyone reads this way, but at a surface and maybe clearest meaning level, this is a very, Lord, make me not be a person.
Yes.
But be for everybody else.
Yeah.
Super self-denial.
The
sort
word
of thing.
instrument. Make me an instrument.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we can do that in a way that isn't, well, I'll get to that. But it does feel very much like, make me, the less of me, more of you. I'm at my most valuable when I'm taking care of everyone else's needs and not my own. And that's definitely a belief I still hold as central and have been working on untangling. But this beautifully lives into that, right? You're like, yeah, this is what I'm called to be. Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood. And so you can read this as, my needs for consolation, to be understood, for love, don't matter. Help me not care about them. But as I've challenged that myself, one of the things I notice in this is it doesn't say that I may not so much seek to be consoled by others as to console others. There isn't an others here. To be understood by others as to understand others, to be loved by others as to love others. It's this recognition of, it's that next part, right? It is in giving that we receive, which I took very much in tell me what value set this is, but it is better to give than to receive. When I'm generous, kind of an Enneagram 2 Christian generosity.
Sure.
You don't deserve anything. Give your stuff to everyone else, and that's your holy thank you or something like that.
And if you don't know what Enneagram is, it's a Christian witchcraft.
Well, I'll be honest. I think the last podcast we did with blankets and candles and everything,
That was
and a
Christian
ritual around
witchcraft.
metal. Yeah. All right, but back to this liturgy. Check out 2 weeks ago's podcast.
Yeah.
Where there is these things, where there's hatred, let me so love. Where there's injury, pardon. As I've done my own internal work in this prayer is no less a prayer for myself. In fact, I think it has to be a prayer for myself first in my engagement of it. So if I can walk through it real quick in that mindset.
Yeah, do it.
If you think about this as a prayer for my discipleship, for my way of being, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred in me, let me so love. Where there is injury in me, pardon. Who am I pardoning? Almost always me. That's hard. Where there is doubt, faith, and we've talked before, faith isn't necessarily oh, well, I guess I'll just decide to believe this. It's when there's doubt, I'm going to take that hard step and believe that my people are there for me, believe that I'm capable of this, believe that, God is for me, believe that there is good, even though I don't believe it. Right? Where there's despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. And then this, may I not so much seek to be consoled as to console, because I can sit in that longing of, I wish someone would be here for me, and who do I really need to be here for me? Me. And what does seeking self-consolation look like? What does to be understood as to understand? When we think about our own needs and longings, that I can really want someone's attention, and that's a real need. But I'm going to find healing, even if it's someone coming alongside me, as I learn to understand myself, as I learn to console myself, as I learn to love myself. And it's in that giving that we receive. We make ourselves able to receive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Go on.
And then we are able to actually give it.
There it is.
Out to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that goes back around to the circle of make me an instrument of your peace. How do you tune that instrument? As opposed to let me be tone deaf and try to tune everyone else's instruments. How do I become that instrument? And what does that mean? It's tuning.
Finding the resonance, finding those moments when you are drawn into something, to extend the analogy into like a bowed instrument, but then the outpouring that comes as a result of that drawing in.
Yeah.
And it's not in like I need to earn those things kind of way, so that I need to do them in order to earn them, right? Like I need to love others in order to love others. Wait, what did I just say? I need to love others in order to receive
love from others?
Meaning to deserve receiving the love of others. Right. But actually it's, I need to love myself in order to have the capacity to receive the love of others. I can't be an instrument. I can't be used to my full giftedness and capacity and self if I have not shown up for me in that way first.
Yeah. It's the love your neighbors as you love yourself.
As you love yourself, right? And it's the same with the pardoning, right? Like forgive us as we forgive others. And we
do unto others as you would have them to do you.
That as actually matters. I think we usually take that as, well, it's assumed you take care of yourself. So
but it's not.
Especially in our culture and especially in church culture.
Exactly.
It's not.
Yeah, it's almost assumed the opposite. Yeah. Like, right? Like if you're being a good Christian, you have to. Like this is sort of the culture we grew up in, is like self-denial is like that's how you know if you're doing it right, is if you literally never think about yourself. Yeah. Like humility to a fault. Like when you pendulum swing so far the other way that like Philly, you were describing earlier that like you almost don't exist as a person anymore. Yeah. Like you're not deserving of love. You're not deserving of care.
Yeah. Which brings me to a confession. We had to do a second take of the recording because I grabbed a translation that wasn't the one I'd meant to. And it was a translation that used the word, it is in self-denial that we are, or something like that. And I was like, that's not at all correct.
It was rough.
And that was my deal breaker because that would make me totally wrong. So you may find a translation of this that does not hold true to the interpretation I'm bringing here tonight.
Sure.
And also, you may be in a context that has weaponized this prayer to be interpreted that way. Or if it's been like, I've definitely been in conversations. I've used this in multiple contexts before, specifically as like ritualized usage of it for an extended period of time with a whole group of people. And I've been in conversations with others who have decided to use this practice in past experiences that they specifically wanted us to use it because people were thinking too much of themselves lately. And it felt like we should be better praying to think of others. And I think that absolutely, yes, that can happen, that we become so self-focused that we lose sight of those around us. But then the better conversation to have is what's going on in someone's circumstance that they're not able to see past themselves, instead of shame them out of it through a prayer.
Yeah.
What a great insight.
To shame them out of it?
Yeah, the way that we can weaponize scripture and prayer and the idea that, all right, people are being selfish, so let's pray a prayer that they're going to pray along with, and they're going to say, make me less selfish, and that's going to somehow do it.
And I'll admit that I have absolutely been guilty of using it that way, particularly with young people who sometimes I forget that they're young because I'm an adult, and I witness the ways that younger people think only of themselves at times or don't recognize how harmful their words are. Right. And while I do think it's important for recognition of like my actions are being harmful to take place, the way to do it is not to start just manipulatively praying it away together and hoping that they notice the themes in the prayer. The way to do it is to instead go, hey, here's what I heard. Here's how it landed. What's going on? And have a better open up the conversation so that they can have, they can console themselves and understand themselves well, so that then their actions reflect a better.
It is when you are at peace.
Yeah.
With your needs, with your sense of self-worth, where your worth comes from. That you are able to give and be an instrument. I couldn't help but think in what you were just saying and Dad, if Dad listens to this, I'm kind of excited about it. It's like a sorry, not sorry moment. My dad does this delightful thing where if he's putting dinner on the table, he's doing the countdown to how long, and then when the food's on the table, it's time to eat. And he's going to pray. And the prayer will often go something like, Dear God, thank you for this great food that's on the table, even though no one else is here yet. Help them to be more appreciative.
My goodness.
Maybe it's not that bad, but it's that concept. And there's the whole like, and I can very much imagine this prayer being used that way. I think I used it on myself that way a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What has the process been of kind of reclaiming it or reapproaching it? And I ask because oftentimes that interpretive move is something we have to make when we're engaging, especially historical prayers or historical liturgies. How has it been for you to kind of come from situations where perhaps that kind of knee-jerk interpretation is there, but continuing on to the next layer of it?
Sweet. I can't tell you the moment like I read it and went, oh, I don't think that was there. I think it's a shift in a theological lens that's happened over a long time, right? With seminary stuff and swimming in different theologians and finding out I have permission to question things and learning that I'm not the first person to wonder about some things and that, oh, wow, actually a lot of scholarship goes along with this, and people say, hey, read this, and I have a community that thinks like this, and let's continue to find my people and to chase the light, or the darkness, if you feel safer in it. Oh, that's a good phrase. Chase the darkness together. But and so then it becomes gradually as your theological lens, my theological lens has shifted, has become more nuanced, has landed on more, your library gets more organized in different ways. You read things differently. You have different eyes to see. And it was one of those days where I'm reading it and going, oh, because it went from me being like, oh, this is one of those, like some Christian music can do that to me.
Sure.
And I go, ooh. I had a hymn this morning that did that, and I think it's probably a fine hymn, but it was really talking about how God never rests was one of the lines.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
what? And on the seventh day.
Yeah, that's like what, chapter 1?
Yep.
I don't know.
I'm having an interesting experience in this conversation where I'm being reminded of why talking about prayers after you've prayed them or read them is important and valuable. Because while you were reading it to us, I started to go, this is a bad prayer. Sorry. This is a bad prayer for exactly what you named. Like, I don't know if anyone else hears it this way, but it could be heard as, I have to not be a person. And that's exactly how I was hearing it. Right. And I had never really, it just must be the space that I'm in right now. I had never really heard of it.
It was me reading it.
Heard it that way. Yeah. Phil was telling me not to be a person.
Like, this is a terrible prayer for Phil to pray.
Well, no, but also because I know you.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, what do you mean you don't feel called to be these things for people? I watch you not be a person and deny your personhood all the time.
Oof.
Sorry. I say that in a, how dare you act as such? You are a person and I want your personhood all the time. But it was making me angry. I was getting upset. And then you reversed it for me beautifully in this conversation. And now I'm thinking of, and then that's why I said, like, now I'm thinking of all the ways I've weaponized this prayer against others or made people read it in the hopes that they see how selfish they are and pray it away. It makes it such a more beautiful prayer to think of praying it to myself, for myself.
Harder, I think.
Yeah.
Way harder for me anyway, the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
The last person I want to offer pardon to.
Yeah.
But I just think it's why we do this podcast, right? It's why engaging in a conversation after actually doing the practice can almost be more meaningful or make the practice itself more meaningful than just simply saying it and having the moment and moving on. There can absolutely be meaning in that, and that can be very powerful for you, and that is okay and valid. But if we hadn't continued with the conversation, I would have been like, why did Phil bring this?
Yeah, well, I think it's also interesting, like, when you talk about it in the context of praying this as sort of like an invitation for yourself to yourself. This prayer really has two very distinct beats to it, and that invitation really knits them together for me, because otherwise it just feels like two random stanzas that they stuck together. Because one of the things, knowing that this was the prayer we were going to engage tonight, the word that I picked out, or that drew me in, perhaps, in the translation Phil chose, was the word sow. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. And I had this image of a sower just like generously, abundantly, widely tossing seeds out. Like, if you've got this giant field of hatred, we're just gonna scatter love everywhere. And that sower really, like, there's so little control they have, right? They don't know where exactly the seed is going to land. They're like, it's so much more of just this trust that if you do that good work of sowing, some seeds are going to land where they need to in order to grow, or where how do I want to say this? Some of them will find what they need in order to grow. And that makes a lot of sense to me in the context of like sowing that outside of yourself. But like, if you think about a sower, like if I'm praying this for myself to myself, that's like that still sort of abundance, that invitation to abundantly sowing love within myself, where there are these instances of hatred, or for me, a lot of the self-work that I've been doing in therapy is like being mad at little Hannah, because I didn't stand up for myself in a particular situation. So like being able to go back to your previous self and say, I'm so sorry you went through that, and I forgive you. Oof. You did what you could in the moment, and we're gonna be okay. To keep that image of sowing abundantly those things: pardon, faith, hope, light, joy, love, peace within yourself. I don't know. I was just so grateful for the translation that you chose for tonight.
That was so lovely. And perhaps this is insight into how my therapy goes. I was sitting here going, can you sow love in a field of hate? Is that fertile enough soil? That can't be possible. But then you posed that so lovingly, and now I'm like, but it's a field of hate.
Well, that's, I think, a key part for me. One more thing I was hoping we'd kind of get here is the connection to shadow work for me. Is that, first of all, sow is not like a fixer word. You don't sow and have the new thing. It's also not avoid. It's not where there is darkness, let's close that door and go somewhere light. It's not like let's replace it with light. It's where there is means I gotta go there.
Ooh,
yeah. It's a call to go to, not to say despair is bad, not to say that hatred is bad. Where there is, that's where I'm gonna go, and that's where I'm gonna plant these seeds, which are gonna be buried in the ground. We're not gonna see them for a while.
Yep.
But it's that invitation to enter into these things that are painful or scary in order to plant, which is a hopeful thing with the vision of restoration and beauty and life being where maybe you wouldn't go before.
Well, and to Hannah's point, as the sower, you just don't have control. So you just throw it abundantly out there. I suck at planting things. It could be the fertilest soil in the world and have the best light and it will die before it even grows because I've touched it. Like that's probably not true, but that's how it feels. And you just don't know the outcome. So also, that beautiful image of I'm releasing control. Yeah. I don't know what will come of this. And yet here I am doing it anyways in the least likely of places.
Well, this is where the difference is between peacemaker and peacekeeper, right? Where in my peacekeeper mode, which is my more natural setting, I'm just trying to make the conflict not happen or not disturb things. Peacemaker means we lean into the suck, right? We lean into the pain, we lean into the conflict.
So what you're saying is, I'm actually the peacemaker.
I'm saying, so Enneagram speak 9 and 8 are next to each other. A 9 who's not leaning onto that 8 wing in order to do the peacemaking is missing it. You need to. And so that's the thing where I think I've told all of you probably this, but like one of my first tattoos someday when I do it. Have I not told you this?
No, I thought you were telling us you had a tattoo, and I was like, when did it happen?
Haven't done it yet. When I have money and I'm a therapist and we'll do this. But like, one of them wants to be a black dragon, kind of like Night Fury, toothless-ish. But like, it's this idea of shadow work and that we need to befriend the thing that's scary to us, very How to Train Your Dragon. But like, we need to befriend our shadows. And so those things at the start, we need to befriend and plant those seeds in order to become that instrument of peace, that maker of peace.
We are coming down towards the end of our time on this podcast, but one more chance as we start to wrap it up. Is there anything that you wanted to be sure to have said? Is there any part of this that maybe is a line that you hope people carry with them as they recede away from having spent time in this prayer and with us on this podcast?
I think it's tough to break it down to like one line that does it for me. It's a big picture prayer for me. Honestly, the one I don't think we talked about much is and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And that one's a thing for me because in my theology, I don't tend to be very that focusing on afterlife things. Not that that's not a part of my faith, but it's not where I tend to focus. And so I'm still sitting with that one a bit. And it really resonates with that old interpretation or that original interpretation of like, when I'm not a person, I get to go to heaven or I get my crown. And I don't, what does it mean? What is dying? What is rising? What is permanent? What is passing? It's not a done conversation in me. It feels like there's still more wrestling to do here in what it means to. Death is like that real darkness, right? The real scary. So what does it mean to walk into that shadow and befriend it?
Oh, I just got a Deathly Hallows callback to
The third brother.
The third brother greeting death like an old friend.
Yes.
Listen, if you don't know Harry Potter, I'm so sorry that you don't understand that reference. Please Google the story of the three brothers. You will find it rather quickly. But if you want to understand the reference. If not, just know there's a brother. All the other brothers.
Here's the story.
Just look it up. Never mind. I'm so sorry. But it was such a beautiful clapback. Clapback? We're done. The time has passed.
We are done. We are arriving at the end of the podcast, but thank you, Phil, for bringing this to us today, for inviting us into this liturgy and inviting us a little bit into a window into your life. Does anyone want to talk about? We're not. So first of all, this conversation doesn't have to end. We'd love to keep talking with all of you about this liturgy on any of the socials. We're on pretty much all of them. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
At Wayfolk.
At Wayfolk Arts is the way to find us there. But does anyone want to talk about? We're going to talk about stuff for a little bit longer. Does anyone want to jump in on that?
I'd love us to spend a minute talking about shadow work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you would like to continue this conversation with us, we do sort of an after conversation that we make available, especially to our Patreon patrons. We need support in order to do the work that we do. So we have a Patreon to help support us. And no matter which tier you support us at, one of the benefits you will get is access to this sort of after conversation where you can only fit so much into one episode. And we get really excited when we talk about liturgy, so we always have lots to say. Come continue the conversation with us. That after conversation will be available to our patrons.
All of our patrons.
Yes.
So we'll see you. If you want to jump into that conversation, we'll see you at patreon.com/wayfolkarts.
Link in the description.
Link in the description. You can just go to the show notes and click on through. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, thank you.
Anytime, I'm happy to set aside myself in
Okay.
order to meet your needs.
There it is. There it is.
Oh, there it is.
Will we hear the prayer one more time?
Yeah. Would you read the prayer
Take
one
us
more
out
time
with
for
prayer.
us? Yeah.
The prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this conversation and getting to know Phil a little bit more through this liturgy. Fortunately, though this podcast is now coming to an end, the conversation doesn't have to stop here. We'd love to keep talking about this liturgy with all of you on any of our social media accounts or on our Patreon. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the username @Wayfolk Arts. We also have a Discord that we make available to our patrons on Patreon. So, if there are any ways that you want to reach out and have a conversation with us, with the greater Wayfolk Arts community, or with anyone else who has listened to Liturgical Shenanigans today, you can find us on any of those sites. Thank you all once again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. And let's hear this prayer of St. Francis of Assisi.
Assisi?
I'll take it again. Assisi.
Assisi.
I think we leave that in.
We weren't calling, to be clear, St. Francis is not a sissy.
He's not. Oh my gosh.
Well, maybe he was. I guess I didn't know him personally.
I tried so hard.
And got so far in the end.
Okay, we're taking more deep breaths. Oh no, okay.